Grand Admiral Thrawn, a military genius, an expert at discovering and brutally exploiting his enemies' weaknesses. The Covenant, a cult-like religious alliance of several alien races which together drove humanity to the brink of destruction. How would these two sci-fi powerhouses fare in direct combat? More specifically, how would the Chiss Grand Admiral take advantage of the weaknesses of the Covenant during full-scale war? That's what we'll discuss today, and we're not focusing on a military comparison here, whether the Empire is greater than the Covenant or anything like that, but instead the strategies and tricks that Thrawn might have employed during the Human-Covenant War. So basically, we'll be taking the Imperial Grand Admiral and loaning him to the UNSC. Let's get some background about Thrawn. He is most well known for his uncanny ability to break down the art and culture of his enemies, which then of course goes on to inform his military strategy. An example of this would be at Yukio, where he developed a technique which preyed on the species' fear of the unknown, causing the planet to capitulate to his demands. Before joining the Empire, he destroyed a Trade Federation task force by learning on the fly how droid fighters acted and were controlled, despite having no experience with droids previously. Another example is the Battle of Abroa Sky, and I'll read a quote which illustrates his way of thinking. They're trying the only defense they know of against a Marg Sable, or to be more precise, the only defense they are psychologically capable of attempting. He nodded towards the flashing sphere. You see, Captain, there's an Elam commanding that force. An Elaman simply cannot handle the unstructured attack profile of a properly executed Marg Sable. Pelion stared at the invaders, still shifting into their utterly useless defensive stance. That sentry attack a few minutes ago, he said. You were able to tell from that those were Elaman ships? Learn about art, Captain, Thrawn said, his voice almost dreamy. When you understand a species' art, you understand that species. So basically, despite being horrifically outgunned, Thrawn is able to look at the formation of an enemy fleet, figure out the species commanding it, then develop a technique which allows him to easily destroy them. And trust me, this is not even the tip of the iceberg, but what's important is that Myth Ra Naruto has an incredible eye for detail and is able to adapt to almost any situation, especially with prep time. The Human-Covenant War was over 25 years long, plenty of time for the two factions to understand each other. Thrawn's first moves would be to observe the enemy, capture perhaps Covenant troops from each caste, and of course analyze their artwork, starting with Covenant ship design and armor, moving to any actual pieces of painted or sculpted art. And Thrawn's really in his element here, because the Covenant are driven more than most factions by the intricacies of their culture, primarily their belief in the Great Journey. This brings me to his first major strategy, the proliferation of real and fake Forerunner artifacts. This is something humanity didn't do nearly enough. However, at the Battle of Earth, we do see the Covenant invasion derailed by the key of Ozanalon. Not only were forces deployed uselessly to Cleveland, but civilians were saved and the glassing prevented, all in the hunt of a fake Forerunner artifact. Thrawn would create a whole campaign around the Forerunners, placing real creations on his ships and planets, and also spreading rumors of fake Forerunner artifacts. This would, at the very least, make the Covenant think twice about destroying certain ships or glassing planets. Aside from that, I think he would also place an emphasis on finding megastructures and establishing permanent bases on what is basically Covenant holy ground. Another one of Thrawn's main goals would be the exploitation of the pre-existing fractures within the Covenant hierarchy, and there are at least 3 of these. First, the Grunts, which make up the base of the Covenant military, were pretty unhappy with their current situation within the Covenant, and had already rebelled against the faction once, resulting in the glassing of their homeworld. Sure, to quell the rebellion some concessions were made, but the Grunts still largely resented the higher castes, and had an especially fierce rivalry with the Jackals. I'm not sure how Thrawn would do it, but I can see the Grand Admiral, for example, ordering his troops not to kill Grunts grunts during ground battles, or allowing grunts to retreat, basically as a mean to sow resentment or distrust between factions. A second fracture exists between elites and brutes, which resulted in the Covenant schism even without Thrawn's influence. We see how the Grand Admiral caused the New Republic to turn on even its greatest military commander, Admiral Ackbar. I think he would do something similar with an elite leader. We also know Covenant High Prophets have serious interpersonal issues as well. We know they often didn't share information between each other, they would allow the others to die or make serious mistakes, and just generally there was constant competition. All of this could have been manipulated to hurt the Covenant. Have the Prophets send their personal fleets on errands, try to focus on pre-existing differences, things like that. Thrawn's next major strategy would have focused on incorporating non-human technology and tactics into the UNSC arsenal. The Empire, during his campaign, was incredibly outgunned, but he was able to even the odds by developing new techniques like the Thrawn pincer or the asteroid attack on Coruscant, while also making use of abandoned technology like the Katana fleet, experimental cloaking tech, and the old Sparity cloning cylinders. The Halo universe, more than most, has vast swaths of technology lying around, due to, of course, the presence of major interstellar empires before the firing of the rings. The UNSC focused less on hunting foreign artifacts than the Covenant, and I think both species largely failed to use the tech they did find to its full advantage. This would have been a priority for Thrawn. Not only that, but the Covenant also had a significant technical advantage when compared to humanity. I can see Thrawn creating a specialized Spartan team armed with some sort of stealth ship and the goal of capturing enemy vessels. He understands resource scarcity and knows how to find and use new assets in creative ways. I think these captured ships, for example, would have not only been added to the front lines, but used for covert operations, perhaps the destabilization we talked about earlier. Just imagine, for example, an elite fleet captured and used to glass, say, a brute homeworld, and to help even the technical playing field, he would have focused on deconstructing, understanding, and using everything from the Covenant energy shields to more precise slipspace engines. On a different note, I think he would have also moved to establish far-off secretive human colonies, something like we saw with the Empire of the Hand, an area which could weather not only the worst of fighting, but perhaps even the Covenant taking of Earth. We saw something like this with the UNSC Infinity, but I think those developments came too late in the war, and newly established colonies could have also supported new factories or shipyards. But I will admit, it's also possible that worlds like this didn't really exist, and that the UNSC didn't have the resources to further expand. Next, Thrawn would have attacked the Covenant religion directly. Mithran Naruto always focuses on the heart of his enemies. For the Covenant, the only real thing that unites the member races is their shared religion. He would have tried to discredit it, highlight heresy within the Covenant, spread misinformation, and generally just try to destabilize the thing that most of them held dear. He also would have taken command of UNSC fleets, perhaps remotely, and guided the UNSC to victory during individual battles. We know that Covenant military strategy wasn't incredibly complex. They relied usually on overwhelming firepower without advanced tactics. I think he could have found some sort of weakness and exploited it. I think early on they would have also tried to make an AI based on his likeness, although there are some difficulties with that in living subjects. And those are the main ways that I think Thrawn would have fought back against the Covenant. Did I miss something though? Do you think Thrawn would have helped the UNSC out? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments. Today's question of the day comes from Austin, who asks, did Kuat drive yards have a secret fleet? And if so, did they influence various conflicts? Well, the Kuat drive yards definitely had a fleet, but it wasn't at all secret. In fact, the Essential Guide to Warfare explains that the fleet was really used as sort of a showroom. They would create their best dreadnoughts and battle cruisers, mostly to say, look what we can build, make sure to buy ships from us. And you have to remember, before the Clone Wars, the Republic did not have a standing military. military, so most sectors actually had their own fleets, and certainly most important planets. Did they help instigate conflicts? I'm not sure, not the Clone Wars. Kuwati-Imperial relations are pretty complicated and probably deserve their own video, but yeah, there was certainly some war profiteering going on during the Galactic Civil War. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you have a question you'd like to see me answer, make sure to ask it down below with the hashtag AskEck. Anyway, until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.